Hi, I'm Steve Penny. I want to talk to you today on overcoming grief. We lost a son. He was 27 years of age and died of cancer some years ago now. But I have a lot of people come to see us on how do we deal with grief. And I've written a book on our journey, and that's helped a lot of people going around the world. But I just feel like grief is a pandemic right now in our society. And so I want to do 3 short sessions on overcoming grief. And the first one today that I want to do is, so you understand how grief comes, is the 7 forms of death leading to grief. The truth is, death is simply loss. When you lose something, if you don't handle the loss well, it will lead and end up as grief that really does become a difficulty in your life. Now, I'm a Christian leader, and so the Bible is my reference book for a lot of stuff. But there's in the book of Luke, one of the Gospels, Luke chapter 7, verse 11 to 50, there's an account only in one Gospel, Luke, of a little town or a city called Nain, N-A-I-N. And it's only mentioned once that Jesus goes there, and so it got my interest. And as I began to study it, I realized that Jesus actually dealt with the 7 forms of death in this one city. Must have been an awful place to live. So I want to mention them to you so you understand, because every one of us will have experienced one of these forms of death, and therefore if you don't know how it leads to grief and how to overcome grief, you will be carrying an impediment or a shadow of that loss in your life. So the first death, Jesus is walking into the gates of this city, and there's a funeral procession coming out, and there's an adult young man who's died in this funeral procession. And so here's the first, and it's the final death for us as humans. That's physical death, physical loss of life. Jesus is confronted with it. It's almost like the spirits in that city that bring death and decay and destruction. It's like they're saying, hey, big shot, you want to have a go in this city? We'll bring the hardest thing for you to do, raise someone from the dead. And so the first form of death, or our last one on planet Earth, is physical loss of life. And Jesus raised the young man from the dead to prove he's master over life and death. And so that's the first one, though. You lose someone in your life, whether parent. We lost a 27-year-old son. That rocked our world. And we had to learn how to deal with all of the elements of grief, etc. And so that was a big thing. You've lost parents. You've lost kids. That has a major impact on you. And if you don't deal with it properly, it can lead to grief. Once grief gets into you, it's become permanent, and it will impair you living life to the full. The second one, after death, is destruction. This is loss of your inheritance. Here's this young guy died, and his widow mum, and he's dead, so it brings destruction into that family unit. He's no longer the worker able to provide for the home. And so loss of inheritance is a big thing. Losing the son as a wage earner. Someone gets put off a job, they're out of work. That's a loss of your inheritance, your income. And so many people say, oh, well, no, I've seen people literally spiral down into incredible grief that's ended in tragedy. And it can be as simple as that. You've lost, and destruction has come to your equilibrium in life. That's a big one you have to face. Third one is division. Another form of death is loss of relationship. Mum's lost her son. Jesus raises the guy from the dead and restores her, gives him back to mother. And there's a joining of relationship, but the loss of relationship is huge in our life. Divorce, loss, which is marriage breakdown, which is division, is over 50%. in life. Imagine how many people are carrying the grief of that. That's why there's a far greater chance of second marriage failing than even the first one. The percentage is why, because people don't deal with loss well and are carrying grief that manifests in so many different ways, and it simply destroys people's lives. So division is loss. So we've got death, destruction, division. The fourth one is disease. This is loss of wholeness and health. This is another death in people's lives. And particularly as you get older, and not necessarily just that, but as people get older and they lose certain faculties or they lose their health. I've seen people literally go into sorrow and mourning and grieve the loss of, I can't do what I used to do, instead of adjusting their life with the things they can do and staying in joy so they can overcome in life. And so disease is a huge one. Kids born with handicap, all kinds of stuff. And in church you get a lot of challenging issues in people's lives. And I've learned that the biggest thing of all is to help people get out of grief. It may not have brought perfection to their life, but to get out of grief so they can live a joyous life, overcoming their handicap, impediment, their loss of. And so disease is a huge thing that impairs people. A loss of wholeness can easily lead people into grief. My life will never be the same again. And they grieve that. Number 5, these are all in this chapter in the book of Luke. Jesus meets every need of death here. So the 5th form of death is discouragement. That's loss of vision. Man, how big's this? People, their dream dies. Someone breaks up their world and their dream of a life with vision and hopes and dreams of great things is just broken at their feet. And so loss of vision can become a huge issue in people's lives. And each one of these accounts, I'm not going into all the details, we don't need to, because I just want you to get these 7 forms of death. You will have experience of. I've experienced lots of vision. The disappointment, discouragement that comes from that, and you've got to either regroup and go again and try something different or have another go, but you cannot let grief. I've failed. It's not going to happen. I've missed my opportunity. Loss of vision is discouragement. And then the 6th one, 6th form of death is also a loss, and this one is defilement, the loss of purity. I don't know how many people, they try and cover that over and get on with the, more sparkles and more weird and more, whatever in life, but deep down, they know they've lost something very precious. Whether that was a stupid act of their own and it took them into a lifestyle that defiled them, or whether it was an abuse from someone else and it defiled them. I don't know how many people I've had to share with and talk with about defilements. I feel second rates. I know it was my fault, but I just got caught up in, and you see, that's where you have to learn to overcome the grief of abuse and all that stuff that brings loss of purity and wholeness. The 7th one is really the result of many of these, and it's disgrace. Death by disgrace. It's called the loss of honor. You get someone that loses their purity and wholeness, and in their circle, they have to walk in shame and condemnation, and it's a death. They died to all that was before, and now they are relegated, and grief sets in. Thank God for the Christian message that can set you free from all of this stuff. Jesus came to overcome death. But you need to understand the 7 forms of death here, because you will have experienced some of them, and if you've allowed it to grow and fester, it'll become a shrine of grief in your life, and then it becomes a life impediment from then on. And so I want to help you overcome grief. That's session 1. We're coming back with session 2 on the stages toward grief that happen in your life and mine. Hey, God bless you. See you soon. I'm Steve Penny, and I'm talking about overcoming grief. This is the second short lesson together in how to overcome grief. The first one was, I talked of the 7 forms of death, which are 7 forms of loss in our life, that if you don't handle that well, it'll fester and become grief in your life. So now I want to talk about the 3 stages of grief that happen in all of our lives when we lose something and it's traumatic to us. The first stage of grief is sorrow. Sorrow is the impact of your loss, the impact of loss on your life. Back years ago, our 27-year-old son Andrew died of cancer. After about 8 months being sick and deteriorating, it was all through his body, he died of cancer. The impact of that on our lives as a family made us incredibly sad. It was an incredibly sad season for us. But here's one of the things I learned through that period. Just because it's a sad day, you don't have to keep it as a bad day. I turned to the God of hope, and God said, it's a sad day. You'll emotionally express that, but don't put it on your life as a bad day, or it'll be a curse upon you for the rest of your days. You'll end up with grief. And so a sad day does not have to be a bad day. It's bad at the time. The impact of it is earth-shaking. It just rocks your world. And we don't make light of that. You and I are devastated when we go through these valleys of the shadow of death. Whatever it is, any of the 7 forms of loss, they may not be a big one to someone else, but to you it's a death. And it's rocked your world. And if you don't deal with it properly, that will become grief in your life. It'll change your personality. It'll change your trust of other people. It'll change your good confession about life, because grief is a festering thing within you, and it's of no good for your future. So the first one is sorrow. Man, it hit us hard. We were very sad, but thank God he taught us, don't carry this as a bad loss in your life the rest of your days. The second one, after sorrow, the second stage of grief is mourning. You got to get these. These will help you really come out of this spiral of grief. The first one is sorrow. I was sad. It rocked our world. The second one, and that was the impact of the event, the loss. The second one is mourning, which is the implications of your loss. See, I lost my son Andrew at 27, and it rocked our world. But weeks and months after that, the implications, not the impact now, we've stopped crying every day. The implications of that loss now started to eat away at me. I lost my golf buddy. Andrew loved golf, and I loved to beat him at golf, and we just loved that. And when he died, all of a sudden, I looked at, he loved surfing, and I loved to be a part of that too, and as a family. But the implications of the loss started to eat away at me. I didn't realize it until I realized I hadn't played golf for a year after he died. I'd said no to all my buddies and all my golf friends. I just don't feel like it at present. I've got too many memories of Andrew throwing his clubs into the lake when he had a bad shot. I got too many memories, and so I lost something that was going to haunt me the rest of my days, and didn't play golf for a year. And then again, God spoke to him and said, get your act together. You got to let this sad event be a bad event the rest of your days. And so I had to deal with mourning. And we'll talk about that in a little moment as well. Sorrow and mourning, the Bible says, have to flee away. They have to leave. You've got to tell them to shove off, boot off, get out of my life. I'm not going to cry the rest of my days. I'm not going to mourn the implications. This is very important. So mourning. And then the last one, if you don't deal with sorrow and mourning, it will. The first sorrow is the impact. Mourning is the implications of what it means for you going forward. But if you let grief start to get a hold, that's the impartation of your loss into you, into your spirit and your soul. It's now inside of you. And you allow sorrow and mourning to stay, grief will get into you. And grief is simply a shrine inside of you to your loss. You go and worship and feed it every day. And sorrow and mourning are your henchmen as you let grief control your life from then on. You have to deal with sorrow and mourning until they flee away. The Bible actually says, and it deals with this issue, it says, faith in God, through faith in God, having hope of a better tomorrow, it says, sorrow, you can turn your mourning into dancing and your sorrow into joy. We had to practice doing that. Instead of mourning, we had to get up and enjoy life. Find reasons to be happy. And your sorrow into joy. And all of a sudden, everything started to change for us in our lives. Do you get those three? The progression to grief, sorrow, the impact of your loss, the thing that happened to you. It hits you hard. But if you allow it to hang around, it'll turn to mourning, which is the implications of that on your life from that time on. And if you stay with that in your life, it'll end up getting into you and become a shrine of grief that demands your allegiance from that time on in your life. I hope that's helped you to understand. The next session I want to do is on my 7 keys. They're in my book. Look out. Where's the Miracle? Finding Hope Again. There's 7 keys that I want to share with you in the next session. And so I'll see you back real soon. God bless you. See you soon. I'm Steve Penny. I'm doing these little sessions on overcoming grief simply because I have been overwhelmed as a Christian leader, pastor, and counselor, mentor, with people carrying grief on their lives. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how it's become a stronghold and a real controlling thing in their life. And many of them even deny it's there. But by their behavior, I can see it. And I have so many people come to see me about loss in their life. Session 1 that I did is on the 7 forms of death, which are 7 forms of loss. Death is a loss of something in your life. You got to check that out. If you haven't, you're catching up with this one. The second session I did is how the loss brings sorrow, then mourning, and if you don't deal with those, it turns to grief. And when it becomes grief, it becomes internally a shrine to your loss that is life-controlling. Then you're in real trouble. And then this last session I want to do with you on overcoming grief are my 7 keys that I share with people that are going through tragedy, loss, and circumstances that have brought a form of death into their life. Here we go. Here's my 7 keys. Number 1, it is a sad day, not a bad day. You got to get that one. I talked about it in one of the sessions. It has to be, you've got to move on from a sad day emotionally, feeling all of that stuff. But if you allow it to become a bad day that's yours from that time on, and I talked about that, the impact, the implications, if you don't deal with that, it will become grief in your life. And so the Bible says God works all things together for good. I had to learn that. I don't think I've ever been through anything like the loss of my son, our family, our kids. Just shattering. But so I just get before God and say, God, you got to help me. I got faith in you. You promised to help. And God began to teach me. Don't know how dark the day is. There's light at the end of the tunnel if you'll move toward the lights. And just because it's a sad day, it doesn't have to be a bad day from then on. And so I had to make a choice. I'm coming out of this tunnel of sorrow and mourning, and I'm not going to be camped in a back alley somewhere in a hut or a cave of grief. I refuse to live that way, God. You've promised me more. And so that's the first thing I tell people. Maybe a sad day, but you have to willingly want to move out of it and see good days ahead because God's promised them to you. The second one, key, is you've got to sow your son. God spoke to me. You've got to sow your son or your loss to God. Again, God dealt with me, and it's in my book. I write about all this. God said, you've got to choose not to lose your son. We know that people live eternally that believe in God, and you're going to see your son again in heaven. He's just transitioned to a better place. You haven't lost him, therefore don't mourn him. You're sad and all that stuff, but you sow him into my purposes, and I will give you blessing and favor and increase even through the darkest of days. And so God said, if you'll sow your son to God, you'll reap a harvest of sons. I love this. You'll reap a harvest of sons. And so God, and I was asking God what that meant, and God took me to a little verse in the Bible, Song of Solomon, chapter 4 and verse 4, and it says, your neck is like the Tower of David, and it's a strong armory upon which hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of mighty men. And God said, if you won't mourn the rest of your days the loss of your son, but you'll sow him into my purposes, I'll give you 1,000 sons and daughters, and they'll all hang their leadership off your influence around the world. And God's been doing that over the years since then, adding people into my realm of influence that would call me one of their fathers in the faith. And it's one of the most exciting things that's ever happened in my life, because I dared to sow my son into God's purposes and not lose him here in this world and be mourning the rest of my days. Sow your son or your loss, whatever it is. Turn that which was a real issue, turn it into your testimony. God will bless you and increase you greatly. The third thing, I think it's number 3. Third thing is this. Our son died, but we didn't. Amazed how many people walk around like death warmed up because they had a death, a loss in their family. You got to learn that just because you had a loss doesn't mean I'm still breathing. I'm still alive. And so I tell people this all the time that have loss. Don't feel guilty about getting on with your life. You can't mourn forever. You can't be in a sad sack, sorry state the rest of your days. Don't feel guilty about getting on with your life, because there's a whole life ahead of you. You're still alive. Number, whatever it is. Next one, you got to keep good memories, not bad ones. Look back on what you lost and find good memories and say that they were good things, even in the midst of it. Had a bad marriage, ended in divorce. Not every moment of every day was bad. You can focus on all the badness and all the nonsense and all the hurt. Or if you want to come free and get out of that, you focus on the good memories. Well, that was a good day, and yeah, we got some whatever. That'll never imprison you in a prison of self-damaging hurt and unforgiveness. And I got a little saying, the fragrance of heaven comes from good memories. The stench of hell comes from bad memories. And I'm amazed how many people have the stench of hell in the way they talk. The fragrance of heaven comes from good memories. People say, how'd you get through the death of your son? And I say, well, the truth is I got a lot closer to God. It was one of the best seasons of our life as we came through it and saw God's blessing and favor on our lives. And so number 5, here's the next key that I learnt in the journey of overcoming sorrow, mourning, and grief. You got to keep your friends close. Find those in your world that can be positive and normal in your season of loss. Funny thing, I was leading a church and I couldn't work out at first why so many people avoided us. And I realized they didn't know what to say. They just felt at a loss as to, you know, they know they can't come up and be normal, and because we're traumatized. No, that's the very thing you have to do. Be normal. Find friends that can be normal in your journey back to normality and blessing, and stay close to them. And then secondly, beware of weird new friends. There's so many leeches around that want to, like dogs licking blood, want to come and leech onto you at your most vulnerable. When you're in a pit, when you're going through a real down season, there's people with, I'm sure they have good intention, they just are not helping the situation. And that is to bring you out healthy, whole, strong, vibrant, going forward in life. The bad days over, and good days yet to come. And so make sure you keep your friends and family close. And the next one, which is similar, strengthen the things that remain in your life. We came to realize our remaining children, we had 3 kids. Our oldest son, Andrew, died. Then we had Luke, the next eldest, our son, and our daughter, Cherie. We realized they needed us, and our friends around us needed us, and needed us and our strength. They actually were buoyed up by the fact that we learned how to stay strong and come through it. And I'm so glad our kids didn't become real bitter toward God and church and everything else because of the death of our son. So many people wondered, talked about it, expressed it. No. Just be real in your faith and trust for God, and strengthen with faith, not with hurt. Don't bleed all over your kids and family. So don't devalue what's left in your life by enshrining what's lost. I'm amazed how people, 20 years after the loss of a family member, still make such a big deal about birthdays and other stuff like that. And they impose this on all the people in their world. Get over it. Get on with being normal. Going from strength to strength. You got a life to live. And then the last one. Choose joy. And this is important. Joy is a spiritual force, not an emotion from your soul. I'm amazed how many people are dominated by circumstantial happiness or sadness. Well, my day didn't turn out well. I'm down in the dumps. No, you better learn how out of your spirit that you can choose to turn on joy. The Bible says joy in your spirit is your strength. Joy of the Lord is your strength. You can overcome anything with joy. And it's your inner strength and your confession. And once you learn that, you can walk into a room where everyone's in gloom and they're mourning something in their life, and you can be the one that brings joy. Then you've overcome. Then you'll realize that which the devil or life meant for bad, God has turned it around for good. That's you. This is a word of hope for you today. I'm sharing these 3 little sessions because I am overwhelmed with people that are struggling with grief, sorrow, mourning, and grief. And I want to say to you today, as the subtitle of my book, Finding Hope Again. That's what you can do if you'll choose this path and get this into your life today. I have better days ahead. Amen. I pray God will bless you. I pray you'll find hope and strength as you put your faith in God. He's for you, not against you. Life may bring things against you, but God will work it around so good comes out of it, and you can go on and overcome in this life. Amen. God bless you. See you next time.